I think that the Ahsoka one is probably the one that you would expect, out of all these. So Ahsoka was one of the series that we actually expected. I don't think anybody is surprised by this. I don't think when, they said, okay, we're going to do the Ahsoka series that, people were like, really?
Right.
Except maybe the casual fan. There's a possibility because, again, we as Star Wars fans are always thinking that everybody's like us, and that people are keeping track of all this stuff. But there's a lot of people that, and this is true even when they heavily advertise stuff. I remember when The Mandalorian was coming out, I was talking to my parents, and they're like, they had no idea. And then they thought it was a Boba Fett thing. And, it's just the typical things that most casual fans of the series would think. So to actually say that everybody expected it is a little bit maybe an exaggeration. But at the same time, I see that they really timed this whole announcement and everything right around Ahsoka's debut in The Mandalorian.
Oh, yeah, sure. I mean, the first thing I actually want to bring up is the actual the imagery that they use for Ahsoka. Did you notice that it's the world between worlds?
I did not.
Yeah,
but that is a good point.
If you look at that, that's the whole world between worlds little map, I guess, star map that they kind of had.
Well, but it makes sense though, because that's pretty much where we left off in Rebels, and I think that, and this is, I think, going to be a recurring theme as
I think they're going to delve into that a lot. I think that's where they're going to really go into kind of what that whole thing was about, and kind of explaining like, okay, maybe she's gone through different portals or whatever to really kind of see how certain things are going to end, or certain things that may be coming. And maybe that's why she's in this particular juncture, because that's why she's so concerned about Thrawn. So that might be a reason behind that.
Yeah, there's been a lot of speculation that people have brought up in recent weeks, ever since the whole Thrawn thing came out in The Mandalorian, is that a lot of people have assumed that, okay, who are they going to get to play Thrawn in The Mandalorian?
Mm-hmm.
This might be that whole, because remember, a lot of people were saying that the Ahsoka episode in The Mandalorian is really kind of a pre-pilot episode for her series.
Do you think they already have Thrawn already? Like the
Oh, yeah, that's a good question.
Do you think they already have the person?
I have been wondering that the whole time, because on one hand, when you're dropping his name like that, and we went over this a little bit, I think, when we reviewed, well, certainly when we reviewed that episode, but I even think in one of the other discussions, I don't know, we've been doing so many live shows now, it's like, kind of, they're blending together a bit, but I think that it's a possibility that they already have the actor that they're going to have portray, because they dropped him in the Mandalorian series. Now, that could be one of two things. Either they're introducing him because this is where they're bringing the Ahsoka story, and if I remember correctly, Ahsoka is going to take place in the Mandalorian timeline, and which is another thing, by the way, that I thought was really interesting about a lot of these series that they were bringing out. Is a lot of them are taking place in that Mandalorian timeline.
Yeah.
Which, of course, is just ripe for crossovers.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Which is, I think, what they're going to do. But, yeah, I'm kind of like where you're at, where I think they have an idea who they're going to have play them. Because there's been a couple of cast members like that where, people were in the speculation mode, like, oh, I wonder who they're going to get to do it. And, I mean, the person they're going to get to do it has been locked in for months. They just can't say anything.
Right.
Which, is just horrible.
Yeah.
Oh, by the way, Boatwright Family and Comics joins us. Hey, how you doing? It's good to see you again. A lot of times, I know it's like, you come in, you chat, and you can't stay for long, but we're glad to have you, and hopefully you can ride out the rest of the night with us tonight, because there's just a lot going on.
Yeah, so we know this is Filoni's baby.
Oh,
and
yeah.
Of course, Ahsoka, so he's going to definitely have his hand on this. He doesn't trust anybody else with Ahsoka outside of himself. Do you think that in the Ahsoka series, we are going to find Ezra?
Yeah, I think there's a good chance. Because, and this is the thing that I was going to present to you too, sort of in a form of a question, but also like as a bit of a, like a side note almost. But it seems to me like Rebels is going to factor in as kind of the central series, that and The Mandalorian.
Mm-hmm.
Because a lot of these characters that they're focusing on, basically the last time we saw them was in Rebels.
Yeah.
And they did that whole epilogue where they covered, like, hey, here's what everybody's doing after Return of the Jedi. Like I said in one of the previous episodes that we did, they were coming up with at the end of Rebels. They were coming up like right at the Mandalorian timeline.
Well, it's funny that because I actually remember the last time I was actually in the studio.
Yeah, it's true. You have been kind of doing this thing from home for a while. It's kind of like making me jealous. Like I got to get dressed and come to the studio. Who knows what you're doing? Like bathrobe and stuff, doing the show. I see how it's gonna be.
No. So,
yeah, last year when you were in the studio.
So, I knew you were gonna do that to me.
Hey,
so
I have to.
But no. So we had a conversation about the end of Rebels because we kept trying to figure out like, okay, we couldn't remember like how Ezra left and what happened with him and Thrawn and everything like that.
Yeah, but Jason.
So I went back and actually watched the World Between Worlds. I watched that episode and then everything leading up to the end of Rebels.
Okay.
And I'm like, oh, okay, I forgot. And once again, I forgot how good like those last few episodes really, really were. I'm just like, man. So, of course, they're on Lothal and they're trying to liberate the people, and they almost had him, and then Thrawn shows up and pretty much blocks him. And once again, he kind of shows his superior intellect and strategy because he's like, oh, well, we got all your people in here. We're going to blow them up. He's like, no, actually, you put them all in one central location so I can destroy the city without any Imperial casualties. And they're in there with you. So it's only a few of you versus all of them being in one building. And they're just kind of sitting there like, oh. I mean, right.
It's, hate when that happens.
Yeah, exactly. And you're just kind of like, dang. But that just shows you, like, once again, Thrawn.
Mm-hmm.
So, of course, Ezra, though, being as crafty and wily as he is, he kind of had a contingency plan. So, of course, the space will show up. And he gets onto Thrawn's ship, and they get into this whole battle and whatnot. And eventually, those space whales kind of like wrap themselves around the ship, and then they kind of just poof, into hyperspace.
Yeah, that's right. I'd forgotten about that. They didn't,
and so of course, Ahsoka appears at the very end of it with Sabine, and it's like, okay, they want to go find Ezra.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that's pretty much how Rebels kind of concludes. But they kind of show like what everybody else is doing at the end. Like Sabine had a new haircut and everything like that. She looked more mature, and so did Ahsoka. She kind of looked a little bit more mature as well. And so then they were actually on their whole path to find Ezra. So I could see, looking into the Mandalorian episode, that's probably what she's trying to do. She's probably trying to just get a location on where's Thrawn.
Right, because to her, you find Thrawn, you find Ezra.
Right.
And I think that's what's going to happen in a lot of these situations, is that you're going to find that whole ending of Rebels was key.
Mm-hmm.
Like, this is going to be the gateway into some of these series.
Yep.
Ronaldo says, this is a no-brainer. If Disney wants money, the Ahsoka series is the way to go. Yeah. I mean, look at how popular her whole thing was, and, her debut was in The Mandalorian. Everybody went crazy for her. He also goes on to say, I think Ahsoka's series will be, in a way, the sequel to Rebels. Yeah, it's looking that way. I'm trying to think of if there's any of the other series they announced that could function as a sequel to Rebels. I mean, there's like 1,000 of them, so.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really curious, though, because, like I said, they used the World Between Worlds little map. And I remember watching that episode, and then it was actually kind of creepy, just like Palpatine's whole thing, him kind of like reaching in through it and trying to grab Ezra. And but if you notice, like they kind of went through two different portals. They didn't go through the same one together.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why I'm thinking of like, okay, well, when Ahsoka shows up at the end of Rebels, like what you see what I'm saying? Like she looked older already.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm kind of wondering, like, okay, what happened? What did she see? Did she come back, or how did she, you know what I mean? Like, I think there's a lot of richness in that whole star map, World Between Worlds.
Well, they almost
piece.
have to. I mean, they have to, right? Because this is where we're last seeing her. So this is almost, in a way, kind of like a Luke Skywalker kind of thing, right? The last time you see Luke, he's in Return of the Jedi. He's looking off at the, Jedi that came before him, Yoda, Anakin, and Obi-Wan, and, warm feelings. Everybody's celebrating. Well, okay, then the next time we see his character,
he's grumpy.
He's grumpy in The Force Awakens, and he's completely disillusioned and everything else. So you basically have these two reference points. And it's like, okay, what happened in between there? And it's the same thing with Ahsoka. You basically see where she left off in Rebels. And now, even though we haven't gotten anything beyond one episode, and I'm not entirely sure if we're going to. I know a lot of people are thinking that Ahsoka might pop up again in the next episode, and certainly that's possible, because if Gideon's got his Darksaber thing going, and I mean, it's gotta happen, because if you remember, Giancarlo Esposito was all like, "Oh yeah, you're gonna see all these duels, and all this stuff's gonna happen," and I'm like, "Well, when, dude? Because we've seen like 2 or something, and we're almost at the last episode. So it's not quite what you had promised, So I'm thinking maybe the next episode, the season finale, is when we're going to get this whole epic thing. And I have no doubt it's going to be like 50 minutes long or something like that, like the previous season finale was. But again, even though we only have Ahsoka in 1 episode so far, maybe 2, we'll see what happens next week. There's still, again, 2 reference points. They got to let us know, well, okay, what went on in between when we last see her in Rebels and when we pick her up again in The Mandalorian? Because, like you said, there's a pretty rich story in there somewhere, probably several of them.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
But I do think, though, that this is going to be, I think from all of them, this is going to be the flagship series. I mean, The Mandalorian really is the flagship series. I mean, let's be honest, but I just have a feeling that of these new series that are coming out, Ahsoka's going to be that foundational one. And I also think that it's The Mandalorian especially, but even Ahsoka, and this goes a little bit to Ronaldo's point, is I think that you're going to find that this is going to be sort of like characters are going to come in and out, either from other series, or maybe it'll be used to launch other series or other story arcs in other series. I think that you're going to see a lot happening in this thing. And I agree that I think Filoni is going to be very deeply involved in this. But now here's a question. And this is what I want to deal with in the Ahsoka section here too. Do you think now that Filoni is going to be less involved now in The Mandalorian? Because don't forget, The Bad Batch is kind of his thing too. Even though I think he's just producing that. I don't think he's actually running that show.
Well, yeah, I think he's probably like, once again, like the story aspect of it.
Yeah, kind of just like executive producing or something.
Yeah, I think he's probably have his hands on the story. And honestly, I think once again, that was one of the first shows that was actually, announced ahead of time. So I think that's already done, quite frankly.
Oh yeah. That's true. That is true. I mean, those animated shows, it's like by the time they premiere. But then again, they could be, I mean, who knows? When did they say The Bad Batch is going to premiere?
January.
Oh, this January? Like in weeks?
Yep.
Oh, well then, yeah, it's done.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So,
but Ahsoka, though.
But Ahsoka, like I said, we don't know when that's going to, and they haven't released the actual dates for these, but they said this is going to be the Ahsoka is going to be a limited series. So it may be like the Obi-Wan thing. We don't know.
Well, and the other thing too, and this is something that I'm really hoping that they do, because one of the things that's horrible is, okay, next week we're going to get the season finale of The Mandalorian, and now we got to wait till probably next October before it picks up again. And I have a feeling that wait's going to be a lot more painful than season 1 to season 2 was.
Definitely. And I think that's one of the things that, or one of the reasons why I think they're going to give us all this different content now to at least kind of keep us kind of pacified
right,
until we can get
exactly.
To
and
the
that's
main,
my point.
Yeah.
Like, hey, okay, so say Mandalorian comes out in October. Okay, well, if you give us like a series in February, and maybe it runs from February to like March or something, or whatever. You know, how many ever weeks the series is, and then maybe you give us another one in like May or something, and another one in August. You know what I mean? It's kind of like, and each one's only running maybe like 8 episodes, 10 episodes max. So, you're talking like 2 or 3 months per series. What would be cool about that is then they start seeding them out, and pretty soon now it's kind of like, okay, the Mandalorian is like, oh, I got to see what happens next, but it's like, oh wait, look, Ahsoka, and now you get all wrapped up in that.
Yeah.
So it makes it a lot less painful. And then basically what you're doing from there is then you're actually, you're going in and you're keeping people engaged. And I think that that's what they want to do. They want to boost subscription to Disney Plus. And you do that by, if you're kicking out all these series, and that's not even dealing with the Marvel side of things.
Right.
Because, they gave like a bunch of announcements there. They had, I think they had like the live action Pinocchio or something that they were talking about. I think they even like a Willow series or something like that.
Willow series, they talked about Black Panther being released in 2022.
Yeah.
And they're not, changing Chadwick Boseman, or they're not replacing him, I should say. So yeah, there's been a lot of developments coming out of the Disney house, the House of Mouse, as they say.
Well, yeah, and I mean, I think that a lot of this is going to be designed to really get those subscriptions going, because if you think about it, it's kind of like something that you and I have said a million times, is that the future of Star Wars seems to be more geared to TV than movies. I mean, what do they do? Make like 2 movie announcements or something? And
well, especially like I said, I mean, hopefully this pandemic, wraps up very quickly, but we just don't know how soon we're going to get back to our regular lives, where we're going back into the theaters and whatnot.
Well, that's true. I mean, they just made HBO Max.
Yeah.
Warner Brothers basically said that all our movies in 2021 now are going on HBO Max. So that's pretty huge.
Yeah.
All the pundits and YouTubers and all that talk about movies in general, they're going crazy talking about that. And then, AMC's like trying to crawl on them, and then the Directors Guild and all this stuff is, because of things that AMC is doing. I mean, it's a mess.
Yeah, it's a whole mess.
It's a whole convoluted mess.
Yeah, and I think that's why, we haven't gotten any information about, Taika Waititi's film just yet, just because it may be that big where it's like, okay, maybe Rogue Squadron could, live on the HBO Max, shall we say, or Netflix, or maybe it'll be on Disney Plus. But let's just say they dropped it on Disney Plus. It's like, okay, well,
I don't think so. I think they're going to keep the theatrical releases theatrical. I mean, where Disney is actually in good shape is the fact that, especially now, they have just this crazy amount of series that they can release. So even if they had to put off a movie, it's sort of like, well, okay, we can do one of 2 things. Either we'll just keep it rolling with the 30 series that we're producing or whatever, or they could just come up with another one.
Yeah.
They could just be like, well, hey, what was that? Remember that script that guy sent in last week? Well, let's
bring that back.
Yeah, let's just do like kind of a limited run series on that or something. And I mean, I'm oversimplifying it, obviously. I mean, I know you can't just, pick a script out of a pile and go, yeah, let's just make a movie out of that tomorrow or whatever. But they could. And another thing they could do is, how about feature-length animated films? This is something I've really wanted to see from Disney. And
well, yeah, I mean, like, they started with the Clone Wars movie, although people really didn't, some people didn't care too much for it.
But that's not really,
but I mean, what I'm saying,
I know, but
that's where it debuted. It debuted in the actual theaters.
Sure.
So you can make like a series, kind of like they've been doing with all the Batman stuff, like all the Justice League stuff.
Oh yeah, and that's pretty much the example I give, especially the Batman stuff.
Oh, man, I've been eating that stuff up, man.
Oh yeah, sweet. I mean, it's just like there's just so much cool stuff, and you could do a lot of cool things with animation. You can tell a lot of these stories, particularly if you want to involve a Mark Hamill or a Harrison Ford or any of those guys, but you don't want to pay all the money to de-age them, because that's been a thing too. Well, do you bring Luke Skywalker in The Mandalorian? Because it would fit. I mean, it definitely fits. And even with the Ahsoka series, if that's taking place at the same time as The Mandalorian, certainly Luke Skywalker would fit into that too. But the problem is, okay, he's given his blessing to Sebastian Stan to, pick up the mantle, but it gets a little bit weird because you leave him in Return of the Jedi and it's Mark Hamill, and then you're picking up into something that's supposedly after that.
With somebody else.
Yeah.
But then, after that, you get the actual Mark Hamill back.
Right.
Right. And Force Awakens.
Yeah. And exactly. And it's like, on one hand, I get it because, everybody's like, wow, just de-age Mark Hamill. It's like, you do know that costs a lot of money, though, right? I mean, it's like, people are throwing that around like, oh, yeah, well, just de-age, like 3 different actors or whatever, not realizing that, hey, this is kind of a costly and time-consuming thing.
Right.
We're just throwing around these terms, and that's because we've seen it so successfully, more so on the Marvel side of it. Like what they did with Michael Douglas and Ant-Man and Wasp, I was like, dude, this is pretty crazy, man.
Yeah. I just think that with even, like to your point with the whole animation thing, it's funny because like I was talking to my grandfather today and we were talking about Star Wars, and he was just really happy about like the Clone Wars because he's like, I kind of didn't like, this cartoon and I really don't do that. But then like, I'm in my room and I'm hearing like the theme music to the Clone Wars blaring, through his soundbar, and I'm like, oh, okay.
Great. It's like the new generation of porn. People are probably like sneaking down, like cartoons or whatever, but then they're sneaking in there,
going to the kid stash.
Exactly. It's kind of like the old days, with like you're getting that barely like that pictures all like wavy and stuff, and you're trying to like make something out.
Yeah, but see, now he's all into it though. He's really like taking, the new, he's like, man, this is cool. And now he's starting to see, oh, this is what Ahsoka was like. He's like, man, she's just like, Anakin. And
dude, I tell people all the time, it's like, you have to watch if you're any kind of a Star Wars fan that cares about anything canon at all, it's like it's mandatory viewing at this point.
Yeah.
Because there's just so much crap that comes out of there that you have to, people are like, well, who's this person? It's like, look, dude, if you just watch the Clone Wars, I get it. It's 7 seasons. I know it's an investment, but you need to do it. And I would even extend that to Rebels too. I would say, you know what? Those 2 shows, they're the nucleus of modern canon. And don't forget that George Lucas is the one that basically did the Clone Wars.
Yeah. The thing is, he really loves it to the point where, now he's like, man, I love Cad Bane. And, it's just like these
man, I hope they put him into live action.
I know. And I was thinking the same thing. And I was telling him about like all this stuff that's been released. And he was just like, oh, really? I'm like, yeah, man. It's like all these shows are getting ready to come out. So you don't have to just wait on The Mandalorian. Now you got all these other shows that's, kind of spinning off and coming out. So you're really going to have your Star Wars fix. So he's
even
super happy about that.
And that's the thing. It's like, and this is the only thing that bothers me. Like the one thing that was cool about when Lucas wrapped it up in 2005 was you're like, okay, well, I'm done. I saw all the content. I have come to the conclusion that I can never die now. Because I keep thinking to myself, it really, it gets to the point where I almost need therapy for this. It gets to the point where it just tweaks me out to know that there could be a Star Wars thing that comes out after I pass away that I won't see. And it just, I don't know, it bothers me. But at the same time, I have to say, what an exciting time. Let's see what Ronaldo says. Well, Filoni has his hands full right now. I guess he chatted this in a little while ago. He's involved in 3 series, but I think he will find a balance. I see what you did there. Do you think that Kevin Feige got involved in a way, considering the model that they are following with Favreau and Filoni? Well, that's a good question.
That's a good question.
That's almost a clear your mind question.
Yeah, and that's a great observation, especially, and it's funny because you and I were just talking, right before we went on the air, about how this whole panel of like movies and stuff, it looks like the whole Marvel thing that they did, when they were releasing all the...
Yeah, it's starting to feel like what they're trying to do. So
they're taking some Marvel approaches.
They are.
Yeah,
and that's okay because in television you can do that because the television universe of Star Wars is new.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you think about it, everybody gets really fixated on the films because the films have to look and feel a certain way.
Mm-hmm.
Once you bring Star Wars into television, which of course has never been done before, I mean, other than the holiday special in 78, but I won't even count that because that wasn't even done by Lucas or anything like that. But once you bring it into television, now you can do things. You can violate. I mean, don't get me wrong. It still has to feel like Star Wars.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that this is where The Mandalorian succeeds. They do a couple of things that number one, had always wanted them to do. But two, so they give us a genre, like a Western, right? They give us the feel of a Western. They give us a little bit of an adventure that's outside of the saga. And they're basically introducing new characters while giving us familiar ones. And they're basically trying to make it like their TV shows. And this is what I liked about stuff like, you know, we talked about Cobra Kai. We talked about, you know, some of this other stuff where a lot of TV shows now are moving away from the complete episodic style to where each thing, like recently, I'll admit it, I watched the Saved by the Bell reboot.
Did you?
Yes.
I was wondering about that.
It's cheesy but I mean, it's cool. The only thing is they try to kind of modernize Saved by the Bell by making it feel somewhat like the original series, but at the same time put this whole like social justice warrior thing into it. And it clashes a little bit, but if you could get through the first couple of episodes, it's cool. I mean, you know, it's Saved by the Bell, so I mean, we're not talking about Emmy award-winning television here, but it is entertaining and it's fun to watch. But the point I'm going to make, though, is that pretty much each episode, even though there is a little bit of a continuing like series-like thread, each episode basically stands on its own. Whereas something like The Mandalorian, you have each episode standing on its own.
But it's a part of a bigger story.
But it is, yes. You basically have like this whole overall story arc. And what I think is important is that now, much like Cobra Kai, which is a little bit more like the same thing, you can essentially now go, okay, like 10 episodes, if each one's like a half hour or something, you know, you're telling like a 5-hour movie now. Rather than releasing a 2-hour and 20-minute movie in the theaters. You can get a little bit more in depth.
True. I completely agree.
So, I mean, I don't know. That's Ahsoka.
Right.
I mean, is there anything else you guys want to talk about with Ahsoka? I mean, what do you think of this whole Ahsoka series? We knew it was coming, but definitely let us know. You still have time to chat. I mean, look, we're pretty much going to be here all night with all these series that are coming out. But, hey, let us know in the comment section, too. If you're watching the rebroadcast, let us know what you guys are thinking. Are you excited for the Ahsoka series? Where do you think the Ahsoka series is going to go? Because that's an important thing, too. We don't really know. I mean, we kind of have a feel for the character, but we don't know what's going to happen. You know, let us know.
Head to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Be sure to follow us on Twitter @HeadToHeadSW. Submit your questions for our next show. Visit our official website at headtoheadswpodcast.com. Until next time, may the Force be with you, always.